Welcome to Taking Care of Lady Business, where we put the business back in lady business. Hosted by Jennifer Justice, founder and CEO of the Justice Department, a management strategy and law firm that works with female and woke male entrepreneurs, executives, talent, brands, and creatives to build and maximize their wealth, focusing in the areas of tech, consumer product, finance, media, entertainment, and fashion. Jennifer interviews entrepreneurial women who have done it all, who will be sharing their secrets on all things business, especially as a woman. These highly successful women will share strategies and insights, including what not to do and what it takes to win. And now, here's your host, Jennifer Justice.
Hi, this is JJ, the host of this podcast, Taking Care of Lady Business. If you're here, you know my passion for making women rich. Did you know that men are 4 times more likely than women to negotiate their compensation packages? And that women are leaving about $1.5 million on the table by the time they're 60 by not negotiating? That's a lot of money, and I want it to stop. So I'm launching a course called Be the Boss of Your Career to show you how to get what you deserve. Our first live session is May 3rd, so go to www.thejusticedept.com to sign up for more information. I look forward to seeing you there and helping you get rich. Thanks to MedJet for supporting the Lady Business podcast. If you're hospitalized or your security is threatened while traveling, they can get you home. I'm a MedJet member and have been for years. Everyone who travels should be. Enroll before your next trip at medjet.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. I'm Jennifer Justice. Today, we have a woman whose career is just unmatched by anyone that I know, especially a man or a woman, by the way. Mindy Grossman is here today to impart all of her wisdom on us. Hi, Mindy.
Hi, always great to be having great conversations with you.
Thank you. I want to get right into it, though, to talk about, because you and I have a lot of amazing conversations. I'm lucky to be able to catch dinner or drinks with you here and there. But I want to first give some background of your very illustrious career and things that you've done. So can we just jump into that and a bit of your background? I know it's not easy because it's so many amazing things, but just a little snapshot.
Sure. Well, just to give the quick background, I was planning to be a lawyer and ready to go to law school. In my last semester, senior year of college, decided that I wanted to make a big shift. So in addition to not going to law school, I was also engaged to be married. So I kind of blew up everything, broke my engagement, didn't get married, didn't go to law school, and said, I'm moving to New York. And I want to be in a creative industry where I could also use my business and strategic knowledge. And I ended up spending the first segment of my career in the menswear business. And my feeling was I didn't necessarily have to be the creator. I wanted to be in the business of making creativity successful. And
can I stop you right there? Because that's so interesting, because I did the exact same thing. I was like, I'm not the creator. I want to be, that marrying the art and commerce. What was it in your background that was like, I want to be near creatives, but I'm not the creative?
I explored a lot of different things. I finished high school in my junior year. I tried to absorb everything, and whether that was sports, whether that was arts, whether that was every other element. I was an English literature major. I always loved cultural things. But I really identified that, and I'm a big believer, know where your greatest value is. And I knew that there were a lot more talented people than I was in, let's call it design or those capabilities, but I understood it and I could work really well, just like you have so much of your career with creative people, because I had an understanding of them. Yeah. So how did I take that creative and make it successful from a business background?
Yeah.
And that's been pretty consistent throughout, my career, that intersection of culture and creativity and business. So I worked for designers such as Jeffrey Banks, Willie Smith in the 80s, who was really the first preeminent Black designer.
Mhm.
And then I worked for Tommy Hilfiger and ultimately 10 years with Ralph Lauren. I turned around Chaps Ralph Lauren. I ran new business development. And then I started Polo Jeans Company and ran that until it got acquired by Jones, New York, and knew I didn't want to stay after that. That's a whole other story. And then I joined Phil Knight at Nike when he came back into the company in 2000 and ran their global apparel business. And ultimately then went to work for Barry Diller to take over his retail portfolio, which amongst other businesses included HSN, and completely transformed. And in addition to wanting to make creativity successful, I love transformation and growth. Did that for combined 11 years, 2 years with Barry. And then I took the company public after 2 years and ran the company. And then got to a point where I was potentially going to move into the chairman role, but I felt I wanted to do one more thing. But I promised myself if I did that one more thing, I wanted to have both a financial and a human impact. And when Oprah made the decision to partner and be part of Weight Watchers to transform it into a more relevant, more health, wellness, weight business, I joined her in that effort and did that. And, after almost 5 years, I told the board it's time to transition, here's the next phase.
Oprah,
Yeah, I made it. She was great. She was absolutely great. And we're still friends to this day. But I then made the kind of decision after a lot of thought. And this is something I feel very strongly about. I think it's important to decide what you want to say no to before you even decide what you say yes to.
Mhm.
And after a lot of soul searching, I made the decision I didn't want to go run another public company, another company. I'd been doing it for 15 and a half years, but I wanted to take my experience and how could I apply it to helping CEOs and teams affect transformation and accelerate growth and value. So I joined a firm called Consello, and that is what we do, but uniquely in that every one of our partners has been operators. And Declan Kelly, who started the company, was my CEO advisor for 8.5 years.
Oh, wow.
So I know what that can be done well. So it's been interesting for me, as I say, for 45 years, the consumer was my client and I was the client. And now I'm on the other side.
Right.
But I'm loving it.
That is a crazy career, and I want to go back to some of
It's
it
not
because
linear. It's definitely
it's
not
definitely
linear.
not linear. And I love these stories because, you get out of college and you think that's what you have to do. You blew up what you were going to do at the end of college, but you're still young. So you're like, okay, I can still like figure out what I'm doing. I mean, retail has been a consistent thing for the most part until kind of Weight Watchers, really, right? But you ran Nike, which I don't think the global apparel business, but I don't think a lot of people realize that you were at Nike, at a time when it probably wasn't quite as big and then became much bigger, obviously, with you there. But the other thing is you took a company public, right? Like how many women get an opportunity to do, not only get an opportunity to do it, but do it and do it successfully?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I mean, we took the company public in August 08, 2 weeks before the Lehman bankruptcy.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And I thought that was going to be the crisis of my career until COVID happened.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I learned so much in doing that.
Yeah.
That informed so many things in the future. And there were two ways it could have gone, to be honest. First time public company CEO, just started to work with a board for the first time, a whole new board, right?
Right.
And here you are, with the world imploding. We couldn't even get sell side coverage. I mean, there was a lot happening and being on the road show that summer. And interesting enough, my CFO was also a woman. And I would say that entire summer, maybe I saw one or two other women in a meeting. No one. Me talking about kind of the future of commerce and culture and video and mobile, and the consumer wasn't on the other side of my table, right? But we came out, but then the world fell apart. And I remember going into my first board meeting and being very resolute with the board. We had relaunched the business, about 6 months, about a year prior, and it had exploded. I was the ACO in 10 years. We took a completely different approach. And when we relaunched the brand, it resonated and the business was fantastic. So I said to the board, look, we own 7 companies because we also owned a catalog portfolio that included Frontgate and Ballard and all these others. I said, look, we're going to have pressure on the catalog side because no one right now is buying $2,000 outdoor chairs. But the HSN business is going to be so much more resilient because of how we treat our customer and how we understand her and what we're doing. So I'm willing to make certain hard decisions in the business, but here's what we have to protect. We have to protect our innovation team who's working on the future of mobile. We have to protect this. And we've got to lean in on the HSN business. And luckily, I had the full support of the board because of everything that we did during that time period. We emerged. HSN actually grew in 2008 and 2009, which was not typical of most retail. Yeah. And because we protected the innovation, we were the first retailer to do video commerce on an iPhone, for example. So I think what I really learned, and I tell people, if you do an analysis of the companies during that time frame, the ones who leaned in, whether they had to make hard decisions or not, and said, how do we want to come out of this? And what do we need to do now to do that? Because now's the time to make those decisions and investments, et cetera. The companies that leaned in versus like hunkered down, and just decided to wait. The companies who leaned in are the companies that came out stronger and had the more significant sustainable business. And I think we saw the same thing during COVID.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I had the primer before.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but also, I mean, what's interesting is, was the board all men at that time?
No, we had a diverse board from the very beginning.
Oh, that's good.
Which was very important to me as we were building the board. Yeah. However, we did have a very unusual situation in that because Liberty owned 30% of IAC, so when they spun off, they had 30% of our business, and they own our biggest competitor, QVC, or at the time, now they're combined. Yeah. So it was a very unique situation. So you had, again, you had to be a little resilient. But what I said is, if you're going to really, I think transformation is one of the most overused words in business. People put a new sign on the wall and they're transformed. It's not. It's large, wholesale, radical change. And you have to have a vision. You have to have the strategy aligned against that vision. You have to have the support of your board. You have to have a culture, an organization that is also aligned and in support of that vision. You have to have investment dollars, and you have to be resilient because it's not going to be a linear journey. And I taught a course at Yale Executive Education on the CEO's perspective of transformation. And when I used that last word, resilient, I had a slide. And on the left side of the slide were all of these articles in the press, how brilliant I was. And on the right was all these articles, how I wasn't. And that's what you mean, because you're going to go through a lot of different things in that process. But, what ended up happening is we went public with our stock about $10. And by December of 2008, it was probably $1.30. And then in 3 years or 4 years after that, or 5, we were at 75. Yeah. So you have to really believe and really focus on what the mission is. And what I say, you have to have an expansive vision with radical focus.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get there overnight.
Well, and you did this all, and everyone here is like, it's like lonely at the top and a CEO and your first time, publicly traded board CEO. Like, who do you talk to? Who's your like team at that? You know what I mean? Who do you tell your fears to? Who gives you advice? Like, what does
Yeah.
that look like?
So I would say there's been a couple of different, scenarios. The first is I had the same executive coach for 20 years. And I'm a big proponent of that. And I started working with David Dotlick when I was at Nike. There I was. Phil brought me into Nike to take over their global apparel business. I was the first person out of the apparel business to run the apparel business. It was always a footwear business. As the
Yeah.
most senior woman in the organization, very matrixed global organization. I had to make a lot of changes, whether it was structural changes, whether it was supply chain changes, whether it was organizational changes. And in a matrixed organization, you have to get alignment and allyship and buy-in to be able to do what you need to do. And I said, was talking to my head of HR and he introduced me to David, and we're friends to this day. He's worked with me in 3 different companies. And I think what the benefit of that was, Jennifer, is a combination of, yes, you have someone that you can speak with, but you also really focus. And I say this to people, one of your greatest superpowers has to be self-awareness. What can you do? How can you move people? How do you know about yourself, your strengths, your foibles, whatever that is? And how does that understanding make you a better leader? So that was one. The second is, I'm very fortunate that one of the things that was always very important to me in my career was authentic, trusted relationships. And whether that were people that I worked with, whether that was people in, my network, and who did I really trust? And, I've been very fortunate to have that over my career, which has made a very big difference. And, I see now how important that is when the authenticity of what that network is. It's not just people in your orbit.
It's not just people you want to have a drink with, right?
Right.
It's like
people you trust and people who trust you.
Yeah.
And that's been very valuable. And the other thing I realized, I've been fortunate that pretty much my entire career, I've worked for visionary founders. I've not been in traditional corporate environments, right? And I've learned so much from the Tommies, the Ralphs, the Phils, the Barrys, the Oprahs, that sort of thing. And it's even today, people ask me what boards I'm on and they think I'm going to be on big corporate boards. All of my boards are founder led. I've been on the board of Fanatics, for example, for almost 7 years with Michael Rubin. And I love that kind of belief and energy and vision brought to business success.
And a place where you can actually make change, because sometimes they're so linear, and everything. It's really hard because you have a visionary founder, right?
It's like I've always described myself as an intrapreneur, right?
Yeah.
I've tried to take an entrepreneurial approach even within a legacy organization.
Yeah. Shake it up a little bit. I love it.
People, you also have to be okay with people thinking you're a little crazy.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just it. And as a woman, it can, get out of hand. So you got to be able to like hone it in. But I think what I love is, so much of the time women feel like alone, right? When they're in doing this. And the more we talk to each other, the more we share a lot. Like what we talk about when we have our dinners is like, you got to be open. Okay. We can't just be, wanting to talk about, where we get our hair done, et cetera. I mean, I want those tips too, but like, it's got to be raw and open and vulnerable.
A great example of that, and something that was very pivotal to me, when I was at Nike, Phil came to me one day and said, Mindy, I need your help. I said, of course. He said, we're having regrettable losses of talent, and they're women. and I want your help. And I said, okay, if you're committed, this is something that I would love to lead. And I started Nike's first women's leadership council. And I actually brought in catalysts. We did an entire cultural assessment of inclusion. And what we identified was that the issue wasn't that we didn't have women in certain positions. They just were not connected to one another. So if you were the most senior woman in Japan, or you were the most senior woman, in a category in Beaverton, you didn't feel like you had a tribe of who you could be with or mentors, etc. And we ended up starting this leadership council. The kickoff, we brought about 150 women from around the world together for almost a week to really talk about what we could do, create mentorship programs, change culture, make people feel that this was a place that they were going to be valued and was inclusive. The hiring practices, you had to make sure that your qualified candidate portfolio was diverse before you hired someone. And you could hire, whoever you thought was the right person, but you had to make sure that you were looking at it from the right vantage point. And it was, we presented a white paper to the board on the business case for diversity, right? We brought in the author of the Medici Effect about how diversity drives innovation. And I speak about this a lot, everywhere, right? Because all of a sudden, ESG is becoming not a good, at the end of the day, diversity has a lot of spokes to it, right? It's age, race, gender, ethnicity, life stage, experience, all of those things. And I know when I look at boards that I'm on, or when it was important to me when I had my first board, that was the lens I looked through. And it's the lens I look through when I'm building a team, when I'm building an organization. And what I like to say is I need to know enough about everything to ask the right questions, but I need to know where I add the greatest value. And then I better surround myself with people smarter than me in all these other areas. And what that allows is, one of my favorite things is you want to be in a board meeting or an executive leadership meeting where you're comfortable with productive discomfort, where you can have all these conversations and you can have some vulnerability and you can have intense dialogue, but then you come out of it aligned on what you're going to do because you've been able to listen to all the voices. And I think the one thing that I'm seeing in organizations that are so critical today is this idea of alignment. When you come out and you've made a decision, do people go, oh, we made this decision, but I wasn't, into it? Or do you come out and go, we made this decision, it's the right thing for the company, and we're all going to get behind it? There's a big difference in what happens depending on which way you go.
So true. Yeah. Getting everybody, and getting opt-in and buy-in from everybody, that's not an easy thing back even when I was in the corporate situation. Yeah. And so important that you're doing all this work because I know people who've worked for you and they say nothing but the most amazing things. So let's go to now when you had the visionary named Oprah who was like, you got to join. What was that? You'd been at HSN for a while. So you could have probably stayed there. What made you want to make this new move? What was that catalyst?
Yeah, but the filter I look through, it's very interesting. I hadn't necessarily thought about it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then I saw the announcement that she had decided to partner with the company to evolve it. And I think my first Weight Watchers meeting, I was 13. I wanted to lose weight to become a cheerleader, and I did, and I became a cheerleader. But anyway, my mother did not really take care of her health. She had her first heart attack at 50. She was borderline, obese. And as she got older and I saw, she didn't live the life that I would want to live at different ages. We couldn't travel with my daughter. And I said, I don't want that A, to happen to me. I want to live a healthier life. And B, I had read an article that in those years, and it's worse today, that today's 3-year-old has a better chance of being obese and healthy than living a healthy life. And so I said, if I can help do something about that, that would be important. And, the story was I got a call from a recruiter who I knew about a very, very, very big job in, let's call it luxury fashion. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, but don't you have the Weight Watchers search? And she said, yeah, well, I said, well, why haven't you asked me about that? And she said, Mindy, you run a much bigger business. You've been in this other area of business. She goes, are you interested? I said, I don't know if I'm interested, but I'm curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a thesis in my mind around what could be. And I ended up flying out to California and spending a day with Oprah. And it turned out that
As you do,
our vision was completely aligned.
Yeah.
In what we had to do to evolve, with the premise being, how do we help every person really understand what it means to live your best life? And part of that has to be to live a healthy life. And that's what really motivated me to kind of look at both the science of things. I had scientific advisory board, I had a chief scientific officer, really understand the elements of health, the elements of disparities of health and communities, the understanding of where weight plays, and really everything that has to be, and how did we bring that into kind of the broader environment. And I'd say one of the moments in my career I'll never forget was, doing a 9-city incredible tour with Oprah, 20 to 40,000 people per stadium, on how they could transform their lives. And it was from 8 a.m. to 4, and it brought everything. And, to observe someone spending that time, and you saw that when they left, they were a changed person, right? And that is a big part of what she wants to bring to people, and what I wanted to bring to people. How can you really have impact on every life? So it was an incredible, opportunity. And then certainly had to get the company through COVID. I mean, we had 30,000 in-person workshops a week in 13 different countries.
Oh my God.
And how did you manage through that? And, you realize, though, when you're in the most difficult times, you actually have the opportunity to be the most entrepreneurial, actually, to create impact. And I remember when we knew we'd have to shut everything down, I said to our team, we cannot leave our members alone. We have to move every one of these to virtual in a structured format. And I remember calling Eric Wan, the CEO of Zoom, and saying, we need to do this. And in 6 days, we took the entire product team, the entire engineering team, the entire operation team, and we moved all 30,000 of those workshops to virtual in 13 countries.
Amazing.
And obviously, we knew that we weren't going to recruit a lot of people to go to physical meetings because there wasn't any, but we knew that we'd retain our communities, and that helped get the company through all of that. And again, you really realize what the potential is within an organization when you can bring people together and galvanize them around a purpose. It wasn't just do this for the dollars, although those were critical, right? But it was also to do it with, our members in mind, and how important that was going to be. And those are some things that, they really remind you of what's really important, both on the business side and on, the consumer side.
Yeah. And it's also, it just goes back to, you can actually live a life. And for a for-profit company with purpose. Not everything's going to be perfect, but it's not perfect if you start working in a nonprofit and join that either. Like nothing.
No, I think you have to. I've always said there's 3 words that have been my mantra: passion, purpose, and impact. Am I passionate about it?
Yeah.
Like, do I want to wake up every morning and go, what more, can I do? Is it purposeful? And purposeful may mean different things at different points in your life, but is there a reason I should do this? And will it have impact? And I think I've always said that you can have impact. Some people think they have to wait to be the CEO or wait to be the manager. But no, you can have impact in every point in your career or your life. But I do think, having purpose within the organization, aiming to have impact, both on certainly building the business on the financial side, but what impact are you making societally, with communities, with individuals? I think that's really important as well.
Totally, and agreed, and exactly why I started the Justice Department. But
You're the perfect example of that.
Yeah, but it took a while, and like we have the luxury of these careers behind us, and we have trust in our consumers, our customers, our clients, etc. But still, when we look at all the data and statistics, like women still, like we've gone up a little bit, but not a ton, right? And we have these conversations, like in your mind, like what are the things we know that what we can't control? We know that we can't control a lot of misogyny and traditional, viewpoints about women and business, et cetera, but we can control some of it. Like, what do you think we can do as women and a gender in total, like
I think change? The number one thing, look, we have to create allyship with one another to support one another, but we absolutely have to create allyship with men. Mm-hmm. And be that voice that gets an understanding of why there needs to be more diversity in the boardroom. Why does there need? And it's a business imperative, right? But that's going to create the greatest change. And it's great to have mentorship, and it's great to have support, and it's great to have the network of women. But if we really want to create the change, we have to use our capabilities to bring other people along and realize the importance of that.
Right.
That's really critical.
And how do you think that's done? Like, what if you're like, it's a bunch of people resistant or don't think there's an issue, or like, oh, I always hire women. I don't know. You know what I mean?
You got to call it out.
Yeah.
You got to call it out. I mean, I have a funny story from early in, when I was at Nike, and I hadn't been there that long. And I was in a global basketball meeting, right? Certainly not the expert, but I was in a global basketball meeting, and there were 60 people in the meeting, and I was the only woman. Okay. There was diversity amongst the men, but I was the only woman. And everybody's, talking, we're going around the room. And all of a sudden I opened up my mouth to speak. And all of a sudden everybody's staring at me. And I just started laughing. I go, look, guys, I am a white Jewish woman from Long Island who never played basketball. If you really want some more energy in here and more thought, you might want a few more of me with some different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And they cracked up.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes you have to call it out. I mean, I've called some things out in board meetings, for example, when I think somebody was expressing something that was not right in terms of whether it was, diversity or anything else. And I think you can do it in a way that's not combative, right? And bring people along. But I think it's really important that we have to use our voices in a real positive way with positive intent to create change.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think more and more people are doing it. It's hard. Unfortunately, some women are fired for it, and there's retribution, but when that happens, like, we got to call that out too, but you're right. The allyship among us as well, I think, is just as important, and we don't want to just be an echo chamber of and victim, but it's like making sure we're supporting each other and letting each other know about board positions, jobs, investing in each other's companies.
Like I have a list, like when sometimes I'll get called about a board, and I'm at capacity or whatever. I have a list of people that I recommend each time. I ask people to send me their board profile so I know what they're looking for. So if I see something, I think it's really important. I'd say the other thing is, Consello, for example, what was also important to me, a significant number of our partners are women, which is not the norm in advisory.
Well, especially because aren't you all past operators, right?
We're all past operators, and it makes a huge difference.
So really quickly before we let you go though, so on Consello, like what is the typical advisory, client that you guys have in case?
Yeah. So there's two parts of Consello. We have a private equity, Consello Capital. That's one part. And then we have our advisory. We lead with very high level CEO advisory. We are next to that CEO, whether it's strategic, whether it's communication externally. We're there to help create value creation. And then we also have a complete suite of other advisory services. So growth and business development, Consello experience, Consello tech, M&A and investment, et cetera.
And what level are these CEOs? Is it publicly traded companies or founder-led companies that are like Series C?
Yeah, we have almost 50 of the Fortune 100.
Okay.
Already. We're not turning 2 years old until April. So it's been amazing to see the growth. And it really comes down to, and I say this all the time, that the reason we've been able to grow and expand and deepen our relationships with the CEOs and the organizations is that we're looked at as an asset, not an expense.
Yeah.
Because our whole goal is to support and drive value for the CEO and for the business.
I love that. I'm going to use that now as being a lawyer. I'm an asset, not an expense.
That's how you have to think about it. That's a good one. It resonates.
It does. Yeah, exactly. And then on the private equity side, you're investing or you're advising private.
Yeah,
like, how does that work?
One of our thesis there is, and the reason we've been able to raise the capital and be the choice for some of these businesses is, yes, we're going to invest our capital, but we're also going to use all our assets to advise those firms so we can return results in a shorter time frame and really create growth.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, what's really been happening.
I love it. You are such a force. You're such an inspiration.
As are you. You know that we're mutual admiration society.
But still, it's like you've done so many things and broken so many borders and barriers, and it's amazing, and it's so great to have you. And given your long and storied career, I'm sure you're not short of any answers for my last question, which I ask everybody, which is, what is the worst advice you've ever received?
So the worst advice I ever received, and I didn't follow, was don't ever take another job unless you're going to get more money and a bigger title. Mm-hmm. And when I made the move from being CEO of Polo Jeans Company, and I built it to 400 or 500 million, I went to become the vice president of global apparel at Nike. I actually took not a ton, but I took less to go in. Mm-hmm. And I had people going, well, how could you go from being a CEO and now you're a VP? I said, let me explain something to you, right? I'm going to what will be one of the fastest growing companies. I am a number 2 to the CEO. I am running a business that's 8 times the business I was running, and now I can grow it more. I'm going to get an MBA in marketing. Mm-hmm. And it's completely global.
Yeah.
So I'm shocked that you think my ego is such that the only way I would go to Nike is if they'd make me the CEO, which they wouldn't at the time.
Yeah.
I really do think that for many, many years, the model was go into a business and do a vertical move, right? Just keep verticalizing, right? In today's world, there's a lot of rationale at certain points to maybe go vertical. I'm not saying go backwards, because it's going to give you new capabilities that when you add 1+1, now you're going to be able to be 10.
Yeah.
Versus if you just went linear. And I'm not saying in every case, but I know that the fact that I had apparel, retail, sport, media, digital, health and wellness, the capabilities and the connections that an understanding of different business and lifestyle has been of such value for me. And I would say this all the time. When I went to HSN, I had never had experience in a lot of areas, but now I'm in the beauty business, right? And it's one of our biggest businesses. And I started going to a lot of these beauty events. And I remember saying to people in the beauty industry, why are you only connecting with people in the beauty industry? Why aren't you going to the Consumer Electronics Show? And why aren't you looking at technology, et cetera, et cetera? And now that's happening much more, because something like technology has affected every industry and enabled it to do different things and innovation and creativity. But I think it's important that whether it's, connecting outside yourself or interfacing with other industries outside of the one you're in, are so valuable, because you're going to get the learnings and you're going to think differently even when you go back to the environment that you're in.
Yeah. Amazing. That's great. Like, mic drop right there. There's nothing left to say. Thank you, Mindy, so much for being
This was
on.
fabulous. I love
Taking
talking to you.
care
It's
of
always
ladies.
inspiring.
Oh, thank you. It's so inspiring to have you on. I know everyone's going to love it. Everyone listening, thank you for listening to Mindy here on Taking Care of Lady Business. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Justice.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.